The button spent 4,000 years holding nothing. The button is very old. The buttonhole is not. In the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, in what is now Pakistan, archaeologists found small curved discs of seashell with 2 holes bored through them. They are about 5,000 years old. They are buttons in shape and in material, and they were sewn onto cloth. What they were not is fasteners. They were ornaments, or they were toggles that passed through a loop of cord. The same is true across the ancient world. Greeks and Romans had buttons, and in almost every case, the button sat next to a loop, or it simply sat there looking like a button. Clothes themselves were held on by other means: pins, brooches, belts, a length of cloth wound and tucked. If you look at Roman clothing, almost none of it is cut to the body. It is draped, and draped clothing does not need to be fastened along a line. The buttonhole is a slit cut into cloth and then sewn around its edge so that it does not tear. It appears in Europe in the 13th century, and the oldest clear examples come from German lands. It is a small thing to invent, and it took about 4,000 years, counting from the buttons at Mohenjo-Daro. What it did was immediate. A row of buttonholes lets a garment be closed along its whole length, tightly, at any point you like. That means clothing can be cut to fit the body instead of hanging from the shoulders. Within a century, European clothes changed shape completely. Tailoring, in the sense of cutting flat cloth into pieces that follow a body, arrives with the buttonhole and not before it. So the button did not fasten clothing for 4,000 years. Then somebody cut a hole beside it, and the way people were shaped in cloth changed inside one lifetime. Zip took 20 years in a pair of boots. In 1893, Whitcomb Judson showed a fastener at the World's Fair in Chicago. It was a row of hooks and eyes, closed by a slider. It was meant for boots, and it was called a clasp locker. It did not work well. It came open, it jammed. Almost nobody bought one, and the company that made it survived by selling very few of them for 2 decades. The device that works was designed by Gideon Sundback, an engineer at that same company, and patented in 1917. He threw out the hooks. He used identical small teeth, each with a dimple on one face and a nib on the other, so that the slider pressed one tooth into the socket of the next. That is still the design. Nothing important about a metal zip has changed in 100 years. The name came from a boot. In 1923, a rubber company put the fastener on a rubber overshoe, and the marketing name was the zipper boot for the sound. The word attached itself to the fastener rather than the boot, and the company later lost the exclusive right to it because the public had adopted it as the ordinary word for the thing. Clothing was last. For over a decade, the zip was for bags, tobacco pouches, money belts, and boots, and not for garments, partly because it could not be washed and ironed like cloth, and partly because clothing is conservative. Men's trousers took it in the 1930s. So, 24 years from the first demonstration to the working patent, and another 20 before it was allowed onto ordinary clothes. It is the most used mechanism in your wardrobe, and it spent its first generation on footwear. Belt loops are younger than the aeroplane. Trousers were not held up by a belt for most of the time trousers have existed. They were held up by braces, the pair of straps over the shoulders, and the braces attached to buttons sewn on the outside of the waistband. A high waistband and a pair of straps hold cloth up without gripping the body. A belt does the opposite. It holds trousers up by squeezing. The belt itself came from the Army. Military uniform used a belt at the waist for carrying and for shape, and men who had worn uniform were used to one. After the First World War, the waistline of ordinary trousers dropped, and a lower waistband sits on the hips where a belt can actually hold it. The date is documented in an unusually precise way because it happened to a mass-produced garment. Belt loops were added to Levi's work trousers in 1922, and for another 15 years, the same trousers also kept their buttons for braces because the makers did not know which way it would go. The suspender buttons came off in 1937. So the loop of cloth on your waistband is younger than powered flight, younger than the cinema, and younger than the zip that closes the trousers underneath it. It is one of the newest parts of a garment that is otherwise very old. And the older system left its own leftover. On formal trousers made properly today, there are still buttons inside the waistband for braces, on clothes that almost never meet a pair.